Hi, I'm Madison and this is Device Guide. Last week I talked about Julie Andrews' first memoir, Home, a memoir of my early years. And this week I will be discussing Julie Andrews' second memoir, Homework. And this is a memoir that takes place from Julie Andrews' life from the 60s, the start of Mary Poppins, to the late 80s when she is finishing up her first run in Hollywood and going back to Broadway. I found it extremely interesting that she chose to do stop at her return to Broadway, because the last book ended with her start in Hollywood, ending with her career on Broadway, so I thought that was kind of an interesting, almost full circle moment. There was so many more diary entries I felt in this book than in the previous book, which also explains kind of what I was talking about in that first video, discussing how Julie has all of these details, and I just really felt that she had to be a diary journalist, because I don't remember what happened 4 years ago, yet alone what happened like 30 years ago. I mean, granted, I wasn't alive 30 years ago. That could be harder to remember, but you know. So this book started with a recap of the previous book, which I really enjoyed. These books came out a long time apart, and so it was good for those readers that read the first one and then haven't reread it recently when looking into this new one, for people who didn't read it back to back like me. Yeah, I just thought it was extremely interesting, and it caught the reader up to pick up where she picks up in starting her film career at Mary Poppins. Like I said in my last video, Mary Poppins was one of my favorite movies growing up, so I deeply enjoyed hearing Julie Andrews reminiscing almost on this thing, talking about her interaction with Dick Van Dyke, and her first impression of him was so fun. Her interaction with the children and impressions on them was fun to hear. I love to hear how the little girl that played Jane was very mature and kind of knew what she was doing, and then little Michael was just rambunctious and a little boy in and of himself. I loved hearing all the behind the scenes details and gossip of how they did all of this stuff. One thing that really stood out to me is that they used yellow screens to digitally impose stuff. Nowadays we use green and blue screens to kind of do that, and so I don't even fully understand how they did the yellow, but clearly they had to do it an entirely different way than we do now. And she kind of goes into more details on how that happens. And then she goes into her next film, Emily, which I had never seen before or even heard of. And kind of how she did that film to kind of break her mold of playing a governess or a nanny, because she knew that there was a chance of playing Maria in The Sound of Music. And it was also more of an adult film. And then again, she starts talking about Sound of Music, which I loved. Again, Sound of Music was one of my favorite movies growing up, so again, reminiscing there, her impressions on everybody, the behind the scenes details, all of that was just really great, and I loved hearing about it. I also really enjoyed the knowledge of the fact that she had filmed 3 movies at this point in time of finishing Sound of Music, and none of those movies had been released yet, and so she had no clue how her acting was being received or anything like that. And I can't imagine what it would be like to not know the public's reaction to how you're doing, and so that was very interesting. And then she goes into kind of the rest of her Hollywood career during that first run through the 80s, and I did not know about any of those other movies outside of Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music that didn't happen in my lifetime. I did not know about Julie Andrews' career, which she discusses. Several of those were they were kind of flops when it came to audience reviews and critical reviews, which is probably why I haven't been able to see them or heard people talk about them or anything like that. But it was really interesting, and she also discusses kind of her personal life throughout this time of getting remarried and kind of starting that life together and that family. And so that was very interesting to me. She does go into a lot of personal information, so knowing that her family kind of supports that, because she talks about that in the acknowledgments later, and just that must have been so hard for them to go back and look at some of these things. But I thought it was good that she did. One thing that I also thought was very interesting is her openness about therapy throughout this. She calls it psychoanalysis, I believe. But I feel like even in today's time, like, we are starting to make strides towards normalizing therapy and understanding mental health. But we still have so much further to go. And so I can't imagine in the 60s through 80s what it was like to go to therapy. And the fact that she had that courage to go was extremely interesting to me, and I'm so glad that she did. It also makes me kind of wonder, like, who Julie Andrews would have become without that therapy, because we see so many children actors who have rough home lives similar to Julie Andrews that were kind of not necessarily forced into showbiz, but like kind of forced into showbiz, and how that has affected their life extremely dramatically. And so I wonder, like, if she didn't have that support of a therapist, and also that, like, breakaway from her family into a new country, like, who Julie Andrews would have become. Also, talking about her professional career, going back to her professional career, I thought it was very interesting that Julie Andrews turned down Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I know that she did it because she felt that it might be too similar to Mary Poppins, with kind of the vibe of the movie and starring opposite of Dick Van Dyke. But I wonder how she truly feels looking back at it later. She seems to be glad with that decision, but also because Chitty Chitty Bang Bang became something that is kind of a hit, I think that that's... I wonder if at any point in time she kind of regretted that decision. But I personally think I would have enjoyed Chitty Chitty Bang Bang a little bit more if Julie Andrews was in it, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. Who will know? It never happened, so unfortunately we will never know. Going back to her personal life again, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing all over the place between personal and professional. She does a very good job of flowing these two together, a lot better than I'm doing here. But something that I found very interesting is the fact that two of her daughters were adopted from Vietnam during the Vietnam War. I did not know that she had adopted children. I love, love, love adoption, and so that just very much warmed my heart to hear her experience. And like she says, that experience very much affected her, and then going to Vietnam later and seeing those orphanages and just that country later in life, how much that affected her and her philanthropy. I really loved her acknowledgement to Emma, her daughter, and kind of that flow back and forth of just like her graciousness for her and her daughter to be able to work on this project together, and thanking all of her family throughout this process. And I almost wonder if a third memoir might be in the works or coming at some point in time, because I know so much happens in her life from the 80s to now, and so I feel like she has enough material to write a third book. And so I'm interested to see if that third book might come out. I would read it for sure. I really enjoyed these last two books. I highly recommend it. Anyway, thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, you can let me know by hitting that like button. You can also leave a comment with what other kind of books I should review on this channel. We have a couple of other book reviews up on this channel if you want to go check them out. And we also do other content, and so if that interests you, you may subscribe. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Bye!